Hi, everybody, and welcome again to the Free Cities Online Summit. Today I have Alex Voss, and I'm just going to read a bit of his background. Alex Voss has an extensive background in finance and economics, having worked on corporate restructuring and mergers and acquisitions in the healthcare industry. Prior to this role, he also worked in asset management and aerial investments, where he invested in deep value stocks. He graduated summa cum laude from the University of Notre Dame and with honors from the University of Chicago. He also maintains numerous high-value professional certifications such as Chartered Financial Analyst, CFA, Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, ACCA, and numerous others. Mr. Voss has also formally studied Austrian economics, obtaining an MA in Austrian economics from the Mises Graduate School. Mr. Voss has written and spoken extensively on Bitcoin, Austrian economics, and free cities around the US and globally. He is the author of Strategies for Liberty, Free Cities, and Bitcoin, an excellent book that you can pick up. Alex's talk today is titled Guantanamo Bay, the Hong Kong of the Caribbean. And welcome today, Alex. Thanks for coming.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Natalie.
And I love that you worked at the Mises Institute. Yeah, that was how we first met, was
I
a
think
long
so.
time ago. Yeah.
A while back. Yep.
Yep. Well, if you want, go ahead and get started on your presentation. I really look forward to it today.
All righty. Thank you. All righty. Everything look fine on your end?
Yes, looks fantastic.
Great. So yes, my presentation for the Free Cities Online Summit this year is to present the academic case for Guantanamo Bay as the best opportunity for a true freedom city in the United States. I think obviously this is a huge and bold vision, but I think actually it makes sense from a number of different perspectives. It's really a bold vision consistent with the American dynamism movement and as a real focal point for global liberty. It really does, for a number of reasons that we'll get into, present a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really build the ultimate freedom city. And I think, for the work and effort that goes into that, we can highlight American dynamism and American liberty on a global scale. We can reclaim a site with an obviously very complex and intermingled history and signal really a bold and new era for liberty, innovation, and American leadership around the globe. So quickly, just to talk about what a Freedom City is, many of you probably already know this, but in 2023, President Trump proposed the creation of up to 10 new Freedom Cities. He proposed them to be on federal land. And the whole purpose of this was to deliver new housing, to become a catalyst for job creation, as well as usher in a new age of American innovation, technological innovation, a time and an actual place in which America would actually produce very high technological production, such as things like drones and these sorts of things. Freedom cities were really meant to serve as incubators of American exceptionalism to prove that the United States can still produce and become everything that people think about America from potentially decades past, that we're not in an age of stagnation, that we really can still do things. The best and the brightest can combine their efforts as well as the deep capital markets with the United States to build not just new real estate development, but whole new cities at one time. Unsurprisingly, this fits within the broader quantum leap movement within the United States, which is really trying to advance the United States in terms of, as I've mentioned previously, technological innovation, but also, high value manufacturing, production of new industries, not just new products, but actually the creation of new industries as we move forward in time. A bit simpler, what is Guantanamo Bay? Guantanamo Bay is really the southeastern tip of Cuba. It's about 500 miles from the U.S. mainland. It's been under U.S. control since 1903 with a lease treaty with Cuba. And as many people famously know, it's really administered by the executive branch through the Department of Defense now. There is a military base, but also a detention center, most famously on this land. Importantly to note, the detention center, while, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, the exact size of it is not exactly known. It's really a small piece of the overall land opportunity at overall Guantanamo Bay. My vision for Guantanamo Bay is to create a dense and walkable urban environment, really to create a world-class city that we have not seen developed in the United States in recent years. The site is about 45 square miles. A very large chunk of it is water covered and undevelopable because of potential water floods. But even if you factor out that amount of land and you put in a population density of about 70 persons per acre, you can get a population of about 1.2 million, really generating an actual new city, not as much a town on Guantanamo Bay. To put this in perspective, many of the dense urban environments of Latin America are closer to 100 or 110 persons per acre. Monaco is about 80 persons per acre. Paris, especially in its inner city, would be closer to 100 persons per acre. So 70 persons per acre is relatively dense compared to American standards, but not particularly dense on a global scale. I think this shows you, of course, you don't necessarily have to use every last bit of the land, and the population density could vary, but we are talking about a decent chunk of land that could actually house, a sizable population. Not surprisingly to people at this conference, the vision would also include governance as a service. In our view, the vision for Guantanamo Bay as a freedom city should include a private city administration. This private city administration would work with market incentives in order to create regulation and legal frameworks for operators, for companies to come and develop any of their new products and innovations as they see fit. There would have to be some level of federal oversight, that's no problem. But the city would ultimately uh, function with a default opt-out from U.S. federal regulations. So none of the regulations that currently exist within the United States ought to, by default, apply within the Freedom City Guantanamo Bay. Rather, it should start with a new set, and this would allow the United States to actually obtain the best of both worlds, where they have the current regulatory oversight to ensure consumer safety and these sorts of things within the mainland. But for those people that are willing to take somewhat higher risk potentially, they can start their new businesses in Guantanamo Bay, allowing both the innovation but also the stability to be home in the United States. There's also a very strong narrative reason for doing something like this. It really does present a new chapter for Guantanamo Bay. It shows the world a way to prosperity by setting an example really rooted in American values. Even if Americans have not always been living up to this standard, I think it's something that as an American, deeply appreciate about this country, is that the American values are for peace, liberty, and prosperity. It obviously helps turn the page on endless wars and detentions by transitioning Guantanamo Bay more towards a freedom city. And it repositions the United States really as that city on a hill role model for the rest of the world to see. We don't have to force other people to do it our way. We simply show them how much wealthier, how much better off they can be by following the general principles of peace and free markets. For America, of course, the same narrative holds. It also shows that America can revitalize itself, that the American dream can expand and continue for freedom and prosperity, that the United States can still build the best, the fastest, the industries, housing, technology, etc. And it really will create as well a new innovative venue for the United States to form a sort of laboratory of governance innovation. Things that might be good to do in the United States but can't be rolled out quite at that scale. This can serve as a good laboratory for that sort of innovation. All of this put together would result in something much like what Hong Kong is vis-a-vis China. Hong Kong is actually a special administrative region. It is under the sovereignty of China, but it does have its own level of internal autonomy and quite freedom-oriented governance system. This, of course, has historically been stronger, one might argue, and this has been incurred on in the last, call it 5 years. I think this is just another example for the United States to show how they can really do things even better than what Hong Kong has been for China. Having a host nation that is not as hostile to free markets and to peace and prosperity can allow for Guantanamo Bay to really turn into an even better version of Hong Kong, in my view. So why Guantanamo Bay? There's a number of different reasons. First, the legal reasons. There's strong foundations for this very unique relationship that Guantanamo Bay has to the United States. It's been leased from Cuba since 1903. It is a very strong precedent already for de facto really falling under United States sovereignty, at the same time operating at somewhat different legal frameworks than the mainland United States. And you've seen that explicitly adjudicated in certain cases that really make clear that the full constitutional level protections do not fall within Guantanamo Bay, but nonetheless, no one is under any pretenses that Guantanamo Bay is not controlled and under the sovereignty of the United States at present. It is really a perfect opportunity to set up a separate special administrative region governance framework for that reason. The jurisdiction would be directly under executive authority. It's currently run by the Department of Defense. This allows the administration, both the current and any future administration, to be directly in charge of what happens on Guantanamo Bay. There's no issue with contentious or overlapping jurisdictions. There's no issue with states' rights or municipalities wanting to maintain control or oversight in certain areas because that currently does not exist. And much of this can happen through executive action rather than through the legislative process. Now, we can certainly debate whether this is good or bad, but it simply does make it more feasible, at least in the short term, for something to happen here. Strategically, this also makes a heck of a lot of sense. There is not going to be as much local pushback. There's no permanent civilian population inhabiting this island. It wouldn't be taking anyone's land, and there would be no one there really to oppose a new development. It's an almost greenfield site, so there would be no NIMBY level problems. There is some level of infrastructure, which makes the whole project slightly easier to pull off, but there is not so much infrastructure and so much built up already that you can't envision a new, urban environment taking place on this land. From a location perspective, Guantanamo Bay is also very attractive. Of course, it's got great weather, it being in the Caribbean, but it's also important not to forget that it has a great natural harbor and perfect maritime access as well. You can see here on the picture behind the slide the shipping lanes that are happening through the Caribbean. And you can see Guantanamo Bay really in the heart of many of them. It's a central location and could very well be a strategic outpost for the United States and its sort of own version of the Belt and Road Initiative style of thing, in increasing its and enhancing its projection of power throughout the Western Hemisphere. As I briefly mentioned earlier, there is also existing infrastructure. Here, there's deep water ports. There's a couple of runways as well. There's existing utilities and housing, which can serve as the initial housing for workers that are developing the land and developing the city in the early phases. So it's a very attractive situation in which there is some level of infrastructure and also the opportunity to create it and build it moving forward as would be best equipped. Finally, it's a great example for soft power for the United States. It is a catalyst for reform. A very successful city at Guantanamo Bay would really put a lot of political pressure on neighboring Cuba. It would show, not by force, but rather by example, how you can create peace and prosperity for your people. It would potentially even offer jobs both to Americans that would like to move there, but also to people that are living in Cuba and might want to come over. Finally, of course, it would take the moral high ground as well. Instead of imposing on people by force, it would rather just give an opportunity for people to choose where they would like to live and to choose the environment in which they'd like to live. There's significant benefits to the United States from building a Freedom City, Guantanamo Bay. There's a lot of different ways that it could be structured. It could be a potential solution or a part of a solution to immigration challenges that are faced in the United States. One could imagine that it could be uh, relatively more liberal in its immigration system, allowing immigrants the chance to come to Guantanamo Bay, an ability to come and contribute to society. And should they, integrate within that society and become peaceful and productive members of that society, potentially that opens up an avenue towards entering the United States mainland if they so choose. It doesn't have to be done this way, but I think that is one creative way in which this project could help alleviate some challenges that are currently faced in Washington, D.C. Um, there's no government revenue or financial risk to this. In fact, if anything, it would be a net gain in terms of a cost center. Currently running the detention center and base is costing money. And at least in the way I envision it here, this could be run entirely private with only a revenue share or some level of upside sharing with the United States, but no financial risk on their part, simply that of private investors. It would be a huge showcase of national greatness, that we can still build new and great things. It would undermine a communist regime, but without force. And it would, of course, as I talked about earlier, create a sandbox for, sound economics and policy making. All of this comes together to create a huge beneficial image, an enhanced image of the United States on a global scale. A group that can peacefully and productively build new things, that can provide opportunities to a lot of people, that can create economic development models that could be exported to other parts of the world, and more. All of this would greatly enhance the United States image to the rest of the world. Other benefits, as I mentioned, it would go from a cost center to a revenue or a growth center. It would create a very unique investment opportunity, both domestically in the United States as well as internationally for investors, including large real estate developers and private equity funds to participate in a project of this sort. It could create tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs. And of course, the most important thing to keep in mind is this bottom point, that the great benefit from this is we can create one of the most attractive and dynamic places on the planet for everyone. If you think about how attractive Hong Kong is as a place to live, that's even considering that there is some level of influence and risk that you're subjected to, knowing that it is a part of China, and that must be factored in. Nonetheless, people are still living there and enjoying the opportunities that and the value that they can create in that society. One could very well imagine this Guantanamo Bay Freedom City playing a similar role, except for, even better and more effective. In some ways, you might even liken it to a sort of Monaco of America type of situation where really the best and the brightest with all of their great innovation, business ideas, want to come there and live there because it is a place where ideas really lead, where people can create what they can imagine, and have the opportunity to interact with other people living near them that also want to do the same thing while living, peacefully and in harmony with each other. Just to throw some basic numbers, and these are of course not too sophisticated of an analysis, but just to throw some high level numbers at you. In a 10-year outlook for Guantanamo Bay, I think it's Not inconceivable that the population could be about 250,000 people. That requires probably somewhere within the range of $35 billion of infrastructure investment that would have to happen. This would, of course, be beneficial towards the United States uh, investment numbers. The city could potentially, produce something in the order of about 40 billion in gross metropolitan product, so basically the GDP of the city. And this is in the first 10 years. I think, when we're talking about building cities, the timeline is often much longer. It's closer probably to a 20 or 30-year time horizon. I think looking out at this horizon, the population really could achieve that maximum of about 1.2 million. And that would require a huge investment of about 140 billion. But the payoff is there at the bottom, where this new city is developing $320 billion in GDP per year, rather than being a detention center. I think that's really the upside, that someone like a Donald Trump and his administration could see the upside in and want to make this part of their lasting impact on revitalizing America and making it a place that produces and builds things again. And I think with that, that is the end of the presentation and the basic case for why I think Guantanamo Bay actually presents the best opportunity for a true freedom city in the United States, at least in the short run.
That was fantastic. I love that and presentation. Thank you, Alex. I do have some questions for you. During the whole presentation, all I could think about was that Elon could build rockets there, couldn't he? And launch them. It could be, okay, so maybe this is like the nerd coming out in me, but it could be like the Starfleet base station. Wouldn't, would that be possible?
Well, I'm not obviously the expert in what Musk needs for his Starbase, but I think in principle that's exactly the type of industry, that's exactly the type of thinking that could happen in a Guantanamo Bay Freedom City. Whether or not there's enough space for rocket launches, I just simply don't know. But these are the sort of ambitious ideas that you can absolutely think of for the best and the brightest within America to come and try crazy things like let's put people on Mars from Guantanamo Bay. Why not? And it's at least close
Yeah.
to the equator, so it should be, marginally better than many other places in the United States.
Or we need to start shooting for the stars. So I think it would be a fantastic idea. I think it definitely would. Blue Origin too. I mean,
Sure,
he could probably do that as well.
sure.
So, my other question, what would the tax system look like? Because I mean, I know for this talk they threw the two Americans together, which is interesting, but we are taxed so much. I mean, we work
Yeah.
like half the year for just to pay our taxes. And I personally would love a place in America where I could go for an extreme tax break. So what would it look like?
Well, I mean, that would certainly be up to the current administration to determine. I think they have a lot of authority over that. In my vision, I could very well imagine that it follows along the same vein as what many U.S. territories do right now, which is they have a lot of autonomy in determining these sorts of things. And they've done very different things with that, depending on their particular case. U.S. Virgin Islands has a mirror system to the United States. So you pay the exact same taxes as you would in the United States, except for you pay them to the United States Virgin Islands, not to the US federal government. Puerto Rico, on the other hand, has decided that they wanted to basically do away with much of that, and you have to make a certain level of donation to a nonprofit each year, and then you're taxed, 4% on certain levels of income with big tax breaks on things like dividends and capital gains. In my ideal scenario, right, what we would do for Guantanamo Bay is there would be no taxes. There would simply be fees. You pay fees for service to the operator of the Freedom City at Guantanamo Bay. And then these fees are what is to provide the basic governance, services that you would need in a municipality. And then, of course, some level of that profit could be shared back to the United States federal government in some way. But I think, it would be rather important, I think, for the success of the project that taxes be kept low and they be kept local. So whatever happens in Freedom City, Guantanamo Bay is sort of insular in many ways. You pay for your taxes locally, and those taxes locally are used to pay for, the services that you need locally with, potentially profits being shared back to Washington, D.C. Since we're not asking, at least in this proposal, for any money from the federal government, they probably should allow most of those fees or taxes to stay local and produce the governance services needed.
Yeah, personally, I'm at the no taxes. That's just winning me. I love that. I'm like,
Who
as long as
doesn't?
I have to pay money to the federal government, that makes me happy. Because, well, I don't know how many people, European people, know that we have, we have the income tax, and then we have federal taxes, state taxes, local taxes. I mean, we're just taxed everywhere. We even have a death tax in America. When you die, there's a tax.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's outlandish. I mean, we're taxed far too much, and something needs to change.
In
Yes,
unlike the rest of the
but
world, when you leave the United States, you are still obligated at a minimum to file a tax return. You might be able to get out of tax depending on your income level. But if you make too much money, you're still going to be paying tax to Uncle Sam, and you're still obligated to file regardless. And filing in the United States is no simple matter. It's not
no.
administrative. It's a whole thing.
Well, yeah, it's the complex system of the tax. I mean, the tax code needs to be simplified. That's one big American issue. For me, this was the first year I finally paid somebody to do my taxes because it was too complicated.
Yep.
And also if you're like an independent contractor, like myself, they tax you harder
Yep.
than anybody else. So it's very frustrating, and it's something I'm getting very tired of very quickly. So.
Well, it's
That,
certainly, I would say it's really quite an amazing feat that America is still as dynamic and productive and entrepreneurial as it is, because in every way possible, the federal government has tried to reduce the incentives to producing. Uh, and so it's really a kudos to the American people and to the entrepreneurs here that are doing something about it. But the United States government could back off and make it a lot easier, and we'd have a lot more success.
Well, would be far more advanced as well. I mean, it's really a lot of regulations holding back the entrepreneur. That's a big issue that America faces day in and day out. Elon Musk has even talked about it himself, and I'm sure he has major issues with like Neuralink getting approval,
Yep.
or Starlink, all those things. So yeah, there's a lot of things that definitely need to change within the America model that we didn't have when we were founded. It was much more free,
Yep.
and we definitely do need to get back to that. And this is why I like this concept so much, because Guantanamo Bay, it could basically be like a founding island, like our original roots starting over again in
Yep.
that little area. And I think that would be fantastic. Now, has Trump mentioned free cities again since the original time in, I think it was 2023?
He's talked about them on occasion. I think certainly it's not necessarily a priority. I think in general, what is a priority for the Trump administration is allowing American capitalism to be unleashed a bit. That he wants more innovation, more production of things. Now, whether that is under the form of drill baby drill or under the form of, freedom cities, I think Trump probably has not, at least to my knowledge, really focused in on the Freedom Cities concept, but rather on the overall, we need to, unshackle the American entrepreneurs. And, I think your point about regulations is exactly right. This is why Guantanamo Bay is the perfect opportunity. We We've seen Trump's first administration. One of the better things that he did in the first administration was we're going to get rid of two regulations for every one that is created. And this was reasonably successful, I would say. And yet it was almost, negligible actually in the grand scheme of what he was actually successful in doing is what I mean. But in terms of the effect that it had on the overall regulatory landscape within the United States, almost negligible. I mean, there's still thousands and thousands and thousands of pages telling you what you can and can't do. And so Guantanamo Bay represents an opportunity where the default is none of this applies. If there are certain things that are really important, we can talk about what needs to apply, but the default ought to be none of this applies. And that allows you to really get, all of these, start fresh. And then you see the success that places like Prosper, for example, are having in bringing a lot of innovation, particularly biotech, but potentially others as well. I mean, this is a way that America could tap into that market and say, you know what? I understand that it's really challenging, to do this because of the FDA, but you can still do it in America, just at Guantanamo Bay. And so I really think that's an opportunity for America to capture that market and make sure, as what's really important to this Trump administration is making sure Americans are producing a lot of, the value for the world. And I think this falls consistently within that.
I agree 100% with that because I mean, you're just seeing it. We need to grow and we're not, and we're behind the curve compared to a lot of other countries around the world. Now, would this be like a 15-minute city type model?
That's a complicated question.
I
I
love throwing complicated questions at you. I'm sorry, I had to do one.
I think the answer is it depends on what you mean by 15-minute city. I mean, in practice, we do very much envision it being much like a European city where frankly you probably can get from one part to the other in about 15 minutes or so. Um, I don't mean that it's going to be a 15-minute city in the sense of, at least in my vision, it should not be a 15-minute city in the sense of, what's being pushed right now, where we're going to track and trace everyone in every which way. And
Yeah,
um,
let's not.
these sort, we're going to know exactly who is using what form of print transportation. I think that's the wrong way to do it. I actually think that people actually prefer to live in, close and dense environments where you can have those serendipitous run-ins with various people, but where there's also a level of privacy that they feel like they can be themselves and think for themselves and make their own decisions rather than I have to think along with, whatever the prevailing view is on whatever issue because everyone's tracking and tracing everything that I do, including inside my own home or apartment. I don't think that's a very good model.
Yeah, it's very 1984 in my opinion. I will say, the last time I went to New York City, it felt very crazy because every time you looked up, you saw one of those cameras recording you.
Yeah.
And it just feels so dystopian. I don't like that at all. I like having the freedom to just walk around and not feel like I'm being watched everywhere. And I like to live in that type of society where I feel like it's not needed,
Yep.
and everybody trusts everybody.
Well, I think that's another example of why Guantanamo Bay can create a great opportunity for people is one of the challenges that New York City faces is that there is a fair amount of crime in New York City. And so people do put up a lot of cameras and there's a lot of CCTV cameras put up by the city and the police. And, I agree with you that it's somewhat ominous, that everything I do at all times is recorded by someone. Um, but you can understand why, from their perspective, they're doing it because they're ultimately trying to keep the crime at bay. But if we were to do a new city in Guantanamo Bay, everyone would have to be invited in the first place. Uh, and if they were creating problems, you simply, remove them and say you're no longer welcome. That would be up to the for-profit administrator, at least in our view, of what the Guantanamo Bay Freedom City would be. And so then they have to go back to the mainland if they came from the US or back to their own, host country if they came from abroad. And so it doesn't mean that all criminal, problems would go away necessarily, but it does put a limit on sort of the upper bound of these sorts of issues, which means we could create an environment that's much more laissez-faire with regard to, cameras and tracking and all these sorts of things.
I just think it would be nice to just not be watched so much. And it's really in every country now
Yeah.
when you go out. So another question I have for you is, this is mostly for the people in the audience, but how has Hong Kong thrived and why should
And why should
we copy it?
we copy it? Yeah, Hong Kong has thrived for I would say there are many small reasons, but the overarching, reason is that it had a very freedom bent to it, including importing British common law as the law of the land. It had in many, I think, even called a CEO that was running the country, as opposed to having, a president or a prime minister, these sorts of things. The idea was actually to run it like a business to make it as attractive for people as possible. Hong Kong, when before it really became successful, was really just a bunch of barren rock. I mean, there's not even natural resources. There's nothing there effectively. And what made it successful was that They created the right legal framework, the right legal environment for people to come invest their money so that it could come and also leave when they made a profit. There were no capital controls. Your property rights were relatively protected. And so it made it a very attractive place for people to come and do business. And of course, over time, enough people come and agglomerate that you get a very dynamic environment where people are thinking about business ideas, together with their neighbor who also happens to be very entrepreneurial. And so that's really what made Hong Kong so successful over time. Um, but we'll see what happens now. I mean, certainly China has incurred on it. Now, China is fully aware of the benefits that Hong Kong brings to China. At the same time, Beijing wants to exert its own control over Hong Kong. So it's the very, very careful balance right now to see how that will play out. I think on net, the population is currently decreasing because people are somewhat less trusting of it. This is a problem for Beijing in the long term. So we'll see how that plays out. I think America could copy it because we can see those same sorts of benefits, except better. Because, like it or not, most entrepreneurs around the world are still coming to America to produce things. If you want to be the best and the brightest and make the next new whatever it is, Google or Tesla or whatever, you're still coming to America. And why not, sort of build on that success that we already have in a place that respects capital markets and private property rights, has this common law tradition, and allow the success that can come from the private market.
Yeah, as much as I hate on America, sometimes it's still the least dirty shirt in the laundry. I always have to remember that. So, what monetary system do you think would thrive in Guantanamo Bay?
Well, I think that probably the truth is that it would follow within the United States monetary system. I think probably that would be almost mandated that the United States dollar is the reserve currency. Um, or legal tender. I do think that there should be, an allowance. If you're going to create a place like this, then you should have an allowance for people to do, business in gold or in
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Sure. Yeah, I think all of that absolutely should be allowed. Whether or not it would be, I'm not entirely sure. Um, much like you, I'm a full reserve bank, type of person. I think that should happen, but I suspect that even as ambitious as Freedom City at Guantanamo Bay is, I don't know that reformulating the entire monetary system of both the United States and then, as a result, the world is within the scope of what can be done at Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah. Well, you know me, I want to abolish the Federal Reserve. Like central banks need to go. That's just like my dream, my fantasy. I doubt it will ever happen, but you know me. I like 1913 should have been abolished. That's how I feel about America. And that was when the Federal Reserve was created here. So,
And the income
uh,
tax, right?
and the income tax. Yeah, that was a horrible year for America,
Yep.
1913. And yeah, we're still paying the price for that. So
Yep.
I have a weird question. Now, in Dubai how they have the artificial islands?
Mhm.
Could they possibly do that in Guantanamo Bay and create more land with artificial islands?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly you can almost always create more land, adjacent to existing land. The question is always at what cost? Um, I don't know the engineering, uh, sort of framework for Guantanamo Bay right now, so I can't tell you definitively. I suspect it would be relatively expensive, at least in parts of it, because it does have this natural deep water port and natural harbor that's usually harder to dredge up and make artificial land because it's really deep and that's why it's a good harbor already. Um, but there may be other parts that have relatively um, sort of more graded descent into the ocean, and that's much easier to add additional land to and develop islands. So I think ultimately, yes, if Guantanamo Bay was as successful as I think that it could be, yes, the answer would be we would just build more land. This is also what's happening in Monaco. I can't remember the exact figure, but some material portion of Monaco is actually land reclaimed from the sea, and the reason they can do that is because there's enough wealth in Monaco to pay for this sort of thing, and because land in Monaco is so attractive that people will pay for it. And I think the same would apply here. So what I showed you was, that there is a fair amount of land, water coverage, but there is definitely the possibility to grow the total size of it beyond even what I showed uh, in this presentation.
Yeah, so there's options to go beyond what it already is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, I like I don't know if any people watching know, but America used to have Ellis Island, and I like the idea of Bay. Excuse me, sorry, Guantanamo Bay being like an Ellis Island. I think that would be fantastic for us, and it could show immigrants that, hey, I'm serious. I want to be in America. What type of immigration would you envision for this? Like, would they be there for 6 months, showing that, hey, I'm a hard worker and I want to come to America, or I'm invested in America?
Yeah.
What type of vision?
Well, I think it creates an opportunity to do a lot of interesting things related to the movement of people. I mean, you could imagine very easily a new visa type of regime. You could even imagine a sort of subset of citizenship. I mean, Hong Kong is already issuing its own passports. You could even imagine this for Guantanamo Bay. Whether this is politically feasible, I have no idea, but at least it's within the realm of discussion. As far as immigration goes, I mean, I think my idea for Guantanamo Bay would be that it's relatively quite um, open with regard to immigration. It would be relatively accepting of immigrants that would like to come there and make a better life for themselves. Now, there would be no welfare state related to it. If you're going to come, it's because you're going to produce, and if you become a problem, we'll send you right back. That would be my sort of proposal. So very, very open towards this. And yeah, I don't know what the right sort of timeline is, but I think you're right along the lines that you come there for a period of time, whatever it is, 6 months, a year, I'm not sure. And you actually are productive and value enhancing towards Guantanamo Bay. That in some level, proves that you would like to be a contributing member of society to America, and probably, some sense, unlocks or enhances or speeds up your ability to move to, wherever it is on the mainland. I could very well imagine that being, one path that works both politically, but also, feasibly, both for Guantanamo Bay and for America as the motherland.
Well, I love this whole idea with Guantanamo Bay, and I just feel like it would be America going back to our roots, going back to the beginning, and kind of just thriving and starting over again. Thank you, Alex, so much. How can people find you online?
Yeah, people can find me online just through the Tipolis website or the Free Cities website. I do have Twitter, but I'm not a big boss on it. It's usually my private comments of venting frustration with the world.
Yeah, unlike me, where I just put it all out there. It's insanity. And also, your book, Strategies for Liberty, Free Cities, and Bitcoin. How can people find that?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to get it is it's all on Amazon. You can also certainly get it through the Free Cities Foundation. That'll link you to Amazon. But of course, when we have any conferences, there's also copies available at any conferences as well.
Yes, we do have a conference coming up in Prague this year. Are you going to be there with your book?
I will be there and I'll have some copies of the book. Yes.
Well, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Alex, so much for coming on and giving this fantastic presentation.
Thanks very much, Natalie.